Welcome, everyone. Welcome. Welcome today to our panel. I am Ellen. I am the programs director at the Hollywood Fringe Festival. My pronouns are she and they, and I am so excited to be here with you all tonight in community. I'm going to go with a little bit of an introduction. For a visual description, I am a white woman with brown hair, bangs, sitting in front of my desk. I'm wearing a red shirt, kind of pink salmonish, in front of my desk, which has like a little cloud shelf and a white wall, and it's made of birch, and a little cat painting in the back as well. I am going to go through a bunch of Fringe announcements, so please bear with me as we get closer to the festival. It just becomes madness, y'all, so thank you for bearing with me. We are recording this workshop and live streaming it to Facebook, so if you missed it entirely, tune in late, or want to rewatch, this will be available on our Facebook page and our YouTube channel. We've got lots of staff here today, zipping all around on these platforms so that you can get involved in today's event, no matter how you are watching here or on Facebook. Use those chats on both platforms. If you're in the Zoom room, inside the Zoom room with us today, we ask that you turn your video off if you are not one of the presenters, and it'll help us today with providing some of the accessibility needs that we have. So if you could turn your videos off just for this event, that would be really awesome, and we appreciate it. We also encourage people to include their pronouns and their show title within their little Zoom name. So if you need some information on how to do that, that will be going in the chat now. Upcoming Fringe events. Office hours will be every Wednesday from here on out. Wednesday, July 14th, aka tomorrow, from 7 to 9 p.m. is our second one on our new platform, Gather! Join us in this virtual space to network just like you would at a normal office hours. No Zoom rooms required. We'll be walking up to each other in these little video game characters, and you can say hi to people. It is a really cool platform. I'm very excited. I don't think I explained it well at all right now, but I'm so excited that we have it for everyone this year. We are going to also have our second town hall this Saturday. Welcome to Fringe. It's Saturday, July 17th from 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. And that's where we will be going over a lot of details, including some of our ticketing info and how things are going to work this year regarding safety and health and things like that. So it's a very important event for you to all come to, and I really encourage you all to attend. Info going in the chat. And last but certainly not least, we have our last workshop, the Consent and Conduct in the Fringe Community workshop next Saturday, July 24th from 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. That one will only be on Zoom. That way we can make sure that we're having as open a conversation as possible and to provide some of that privacy for everyone. So please attend if you are interested, and even if you're not, just come on over. It is a very important workshop for us to all set the expectations as to what we expect in our community at the Fringe, where community is the highest of tiers. So participant resources is my next announcement. Ooh, okay, I am almost halfway done, I promise. We have our participant packet. If you have not already looked at it, please do. It's at www.hollywoodfringe.org/participants. 32 pages full of like everything you need to know as a producer. We really encourage you to take a look at that. We also have our supportal, which is support.hollywoodfringe.org, where you can basically figure out anything about that we've written about before is stored there. Any decisions we've ever made, any sort of information is all there. So please start to look at these resources. They're super duper important. Make sure you're signed up for Fringe emails, although I don't know if you'd be watching this if you weren't. If you are like, I think I'm signed up, but I'm not getting them every time, make sure to add info@hollywoodfringe.org to your contacts so that we go into your primary inbox every time. Make sure you're following us on social media, Twitter, Instagram, and like us on Facebook. Use the hashtag HFF21 for any posts that you're making on your own platform so that we can all cross-promote and brand together as a festival. Woo! As always, if you have any questions, please email support@hollywoodfringe.org and we will get back to you as soon as we can. Other opportunities that are here right now is we have applications open for Fringe Cabaret. That is an amazing online program that we're doing this year, which we've also done in person in the past. But it's such a fun live watch party. There's some deadlines coming up to submit your videos, so please make sure you're looking out for that. And if you have any questions about the program, you can always email bella@hollywoodfringe.org. All right, I'm going to get into a couple house rules, and then I'm going to pass it over to some of our amazing panelists tonight to make sure that we hear from them. So, house rules. We don't have many rules at the Fringe here, but we do take our code of conduct very seriously. If you register as a project, you and your team will be held accountable for your actions as you participate within the festival, as you should in any professional environment that you choose to take part in. We strive here at the Hollywood Fringe to make sure we provide a safe space for anyone who wants to participate so that you can make the most honest and cutting edge work that the city has to offer. This, of course, will apply to our digital community spaces and when you are fringing in person. The link to read all about our rules and what happens if you don't follow them is being dropped in the chat. That's our code of conduct. Have fun. Know that we're all learning how to virtually fringe alongside you. Technical issues are bound to happen. Please feel free to DM a Fringe staffer if you need any Zoom support. This is a supportive space, so feel free to get up during the panel, grab a snack, drink tea, make dinner, or anything that you need to take care of your body during the event. We're going to hold live questions today until the end, but if you have any questions as we're going on and it fits directly in with something that we're talking about, feel free to throw them in the chat and we'll be able to ask our panelists that way as well. Okay, I think that I got through most of my announcements. So I would love to introduce our panelists, if our panelists are ready, to come off video. It would be great to see your faces, and if not, that's okay as well. Okay, we're going to jump in with some announcements. First, I'd like to ask our panelists to give their names, their pronouns, where they work. Los Angeles, it's somewhere else within the country, out of the country. Are you a person with a disability? If you feel okay disclosing that information, a visual description, and to throw it in there, your form. And I see Diana's already unmuted, so I'm going to throw it to Diana first, if that's okay with you, Diana.
Yeah, that's fine. Hello, everyone. I'm Diana. Pardon me. Diana Elizabeth Jordan. My pronouns are she, her. I'm an African American woman. I have short, curly hair. As a visual description, I'm wearing a pink shirt. My background is a cartoon character of me in front of a rainbow castle. I don't really live in a castle, but that is my background, which is also the promo for my show. I am producing Happily Ever After, which is a one-woman show that I wrote and performed. My disability is cerebral palsy, which is a neuromuscular disorder that affects my speech and gait, and I also although I'm in remission right now, I live with depression and anxiety, and I'm very passionate about advocating and stigmatizing disability and mental health issues. I'm so happy to be here. I think that's it, right? Yeah, so that's it.
Favorite art form?
Oh, my favorite art form. You know, is honestly, and I'm gonna answer it this way. That's like asking me who my favorite nephew is, because there's so many different art forms that I like. My friend, like this was a visual art. I didn't do that. You know, though I think I love them all for different reasons. I mean, I love doing theater, but I also appreciate art forms that I could never do because I'm just so in awe of the artists that are able to do art forms that I could never do. So I don't think I have a favorite. I'm just in awe of artistic expression.
I love that, Diana. That's a great answer. Kaya, would you like to go next? You're next on the screen.
Absolutely. Yeah. My name is Kaya Amara. My pronouns are they and she. I am a white person with what looks like very brunette hair, wearing gold rim glasses and sort of a yellow gingham button down shirt. I am currently sitting, I am occupying, hello there, Awanishi land. I'm in the Yosemite Valley right now. And I'm currently at sort of a lovely little, very outdoorsy gas station with some trees and the lovely sun coming down, but that also means you may see numerous friends crossing in the back of my video. If that's a distraction or an accessibility issue for you, please just let me know, and I am happy to turn my video off for folks. I am based out of New York, but I also work locally in LA and Chicago and sort of all over. I work mostly as a consultant and as a production manager in lots of micro budget indie things. And going off of that, I would have to say that my favorite art form, although I very much agree with Diana, I'm one of those people who's just in awe of artists in general. Like, I can't glass blow, but boy, is glass blowing super cool as well. But my favorite art form is probably short films. And sort of art house short films as well. I mostly work in film, previously mostly worked in theater, so that's where I'll go for right now. Thanks so much.
Spencer, you're next on my screen. Would you like to go next?
Sure. Thanks, Ellen. I'm Spencer, he, him. I am currently in Los Angeles. Visual description of me. I am a Greek Mediterranean, so my skin is a little bit more olive tan. I have a blue and white striped t-shirt on. I have a beard that's growing for a project. Usually I'm clean shaven, so it hides my chubby cheeks. I have my glasses are, I have to check. My glasses are blue. I've got two black earphones in. I've got dark, kind of oily hair as if I haven't taken a shower in 2 days. So that's where it's at. And my background is kind of tan, and I got a little bit of shadow because I have a ring light that is peeking into the Zoom box. I have Coast disease, which for general terms is a partial blindness with a lot of other factors involved, but the easiest way to describe it is I'm half blind. And my favorite art form, like everyone, I love everything. So I'm going to go with my favorite art form of the hour, which is improv, is my favorite art form at 7:17 p.m. Pacific time is improv. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, I love it. I love it so much. Jevin, would you like to go next?
Yes, hello. My name is Jevin Wetter, and I go by he and his. And I live in Los Angeles, and I've been living here for many years now. A visual description of myself: I'm white, I have a very fair skin, and I'm trying to get a tan, but I can't. And I have red hair, and I'm semi-handsome with a blue polo shirt with a pocket on the left-hand side. And my background is navy blue. And obviously, I identify myself as deaf. My favorite art form, or an art form that I love, really, I've been doing theater professionally for almost 30 years, and I absolutely love theater. Theater is my first love. And I'm also a filmmaker. I'm a producer and director and writer. And so I go between the two art forms. And when the opportunity arises, I'm fascinated with both worlds.
I love that so much. Oh, and I also love that. I think, Jevin, you love blue. You have so much navy blue going on, and I love that. I like that as a feeling for you. Um, so I just wanted to, before we jump in, kind of talk about where Fringe is at with our accessibility practices and kind of name that it is a lifelong commitment of what we're trying to do here at the Fringe. And that's something that we kind of want to infuse into today's panel as well. Throughout this process, when we first started to be like, we should do some work on accessibility, I was like, yeah, I'm going to do this. And then as I started to be in conversation with amazing people, like I've been in conversation with Jevin before and Justin and other people at Respectability and Spencer on our access committee. And I was like, Oh, wow. I think I actually also identify as having a disability. It kind of dawned on me because I've had fibromyalgia since I was 16 years old, and I've gone in and out of different types of pain in my life, and I have chronic pain that I deal with. And there's been days where I can't get out of bed, and some days where I'm like, cool. And so there's this whole spectrum of disability that I was really introduced to. And I want to name that as somebody who came in knowing very little, even though I thought that I knew some things because I had family members with disabilities and things like that. I was like, oh, I know some stuff. And it's really just something that you learn about every day, and something that even us at the Fringe here are really starting to put into our infrastructure. And we're so excited to bring that to our participants. And we're so excited that you're taking the step today to kind of start to think about what you can do to make your show accessible at the Fringe, because it's so important. It is an incredible amount of people within the community have a disability. And to be able to accommodate more people to see your show is just a really important thing to do. So I want to talk a little bit about people's Fringe experience and their theater experience. So tell us about that. How long have you done theater slash Fringe? Have you done Fringe before? And what is your role then? Are you an actor? Are you a producer? Are you a jack of all trades? Just give us a little bit of about you. And I'll allow anybody who has the inspiration to go first. If let me see, or I can call it out. Whatever would be easier. I'm gonna
I'm
call it.
happy. I was
Oh,
gonna
go ahead.
say, I'm always the person who will jump in first if it seems like people need a kickstart. So later on, once I start jumping in first, somebody can kick me in the butt to stop talking. But I'll also just say to kick off as well, I forgot to mention that I also identify as disabled. I very much identify with what you mentioned as well, Ellen, of I've had my disability my whole life, but I sort of didn't really officially join the disability community until a little later on. So talking about theater, I'm also one of those people who is a lifelong theater person. Musical theater from the time I was 7, all of that wonderfulness. I actually got my degree in musical theater and worked in regional theater as an actor, primarily right out of school. And then sort of kind of in realizing how inaccessible things were, I am somebody who is very passing. We can use that term for a lot of things. I'm passing in the queer community, I'm passing in the disability community. And that was something that I realized, I had access that other people weren't being given. And so in sort of learning that, I sort of shifted away from being in the acting space and shifted more into doing production things. So for theater as well, that's lots of indie stuff. Again, indie is my love, really small things, all the good one-person shows or 3 to 4 person shows. And also, as I said, working as a consultant. So I, in film, work as a production access coordinator. And that's something as well that, sort of translates to theater as well when we say, okay, how much space do we actually need for a wheelchair? Do you have your ramp? Especially looking at it from a line production side of things, when you're sort of going in to plan your event or plan your show, and you know that you need to have access either for people in your show or for people who are going to be in your audience. As Ellen mentioned, it's a huge percentage of the population. The disability community is actually 1 in 4 of adults in the country, so 25%. So if you want to grow your audience by a lot, accessibility is a great way to do that. So really focusing on sort of the pre-production side of things in theater, and then sort of how we can continue to make things accessible in even, your media and the poster that you're going to put out and that social media post that you're going to have about the show that you're doing. So yeah, all of those things.
Thank you so much, Kaya. Oh, Diana, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I've known I wanted to be an actor my entire life. I mean, I never really wanted to do anything else. But as I got older and started my work professionally, I began to hear about, face the barriers. To hear, well, you're really good, but how do we cast you, right? So I dealt with that, and that kind of started my activism and access. And I pass in a very different way. My disability is very obvious, but because I walk unassisted, I have the privilege of access that some of my friends who have disabilities do not. However, that makes it really challenging for me because I can go into an accessible space and say, hey, this space is not accessible. But morally, that's really difficult for me. So I'm always torn between that. So I too do consulting. I've advocated because, again, like I said, it's really important for me to do access, and it's a lifelong journey. I mean, I I did my trailer, and I'm realizing, well, how do I close the cat? So I'm always thinking about how to make things more accessible because I don't always have the tools at my place, and I just want to encourage everyone here that this is a lifelong learning journey and a change. I was saying earlier, years ago, we never did a land acknowledgement, right? That doesn't mean, we didn't. Now we do. It's important. And by the way, this is the Gabrielle tongue the line that I come from here in LA. But, we weren't necessarily identifying our pronouns 5 years ago and introducing ourselves. But we are now because we realize how important it is. And for those of you who are supporting diversity, we talk about DEI all the time. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. If access is not part of DEI, you don't have diversity, equity, and inclusion. Because if you're not thinking about access, you can't have equity and inclusion for 25% of the population. So it shouldn't be DEI, it should be DEIA, because in order to have diversity, equity, and inclusion, you need to think about access. And it's okay not to know. I would say it's okay not to know, but just the awareness, the fact that you're here makes me really happy. And I think it's becoming, because awareness and knowledge is the first step. We had more conversations last year about anti-racism conversation because a horrible tragedy made us more aware. We need to have that same awareness, and the way that we're aware of systemic racism, we need to realize that that's been systemic ableism. And how can we not only be anti-racist, but anti-ableist? In our work as artists and creating a more equitable, inclusive, accessible thing for all our audiences.
Absolutely, Diana. Here. I'm always so touched by how you put these things into that perspective, and I just wanted to name that right now because that was really a great perspective to come from and something that I want to dive in deeper and just a little bit on. Spencer, I see you might want to go next.
Yeah, sure. I'm not gonna lie, I kind of got a little Zoom fatigue moment where I was like, what is happening? But yeah, but I'm here. I'm here. So for me, I kind of want to bounce off of what Diana said a little bit as well, with the idea of accessibility and knowing to be accessible can be a challenge. I have produced 3 shows at Fringe myself. I've acted in them. I did all of this, and I never once thought about accessibility needs as someone with a disability. And I think that that's something that is often overlooked and forgotten, is that it's not that it's not easy to to remember all of these different things, but also knowing that like I'm in a space where I'm like, these are my needs and my needs are met, but how can I also meet the needs of other people that may need them? And I think that that's one of the biggest things I've learned through. Also, I'm on Access Committee. I've been an encore judge. I've been in shows that were not mine. I'm in a show this year that's not mine. I'm super Fringe fun. I'm also working on another show that Diana's doing as her mentor. Anyway, but that being said, go see Diana's show. So that I would say that's like my biggest thing is knowing, and we also talked about the idea of like disability passing. Like I have very much a physical disability that is almost invisible, because unless you're looking right up on me, you don't notice it. And a lot of times people don't even notice it. Even then, people just think I just have two different color eyes, and that's like what it is. But because I have the privilege of being able to drive, which a lot of people with blindness don't. And I think that it also allowed me to, uh, sorry, I'm giving my whole life story now. When I was 10, I was diagnosed. So I actually had, according to my parents and my doctor, I had full vision for the first 9 years of my life. I don't remember it at all. I only remember having those surgeries as a kid and knowing that I was never going to see again out of one eye. But then going into learning about advocacy pretty recently, like 2 decades later, about how to advocate for myself, but also knowing in general, the biggest thing I think I learned is that disability is not binary. It's not either you have it completely or you don't. There's a whole realm of things. And I think that that's something that, even like with like the blindness community, there are certain things that I need that someone else, it's not going to be beneficial for them, or something that benefits someone else that I don't necessarily need. And so I think that that's one thing when you are looking into access needs. Having general access needs is having general access for different populations is great, but specifically seeing what people need within that community to help them, because it's not a one size fits all, I guess is where I'm going with that. It's not a one size fits all for each access need. That's
Abs-
my Capricorn brain rolling through words and then finally getting to it.
Absolutely, Spencer. Absolutely. Jevin, would you want to talk a little bit about your experience at Fringe and things like that?
Sure, I would love to. So I'd like to explain a little bit about my background first. So I started working professionally in theater when I was hired by the National Theater of the Deaf. And that was way back when. And we went on tour. We did over 200 cities all over North America and in the UK. And we were on tour, and I was able to experience performing in many, many different theater houses and stages. You know, we had small houses, we had big houses, and we were, you know, all types of styles of theaters we performed in. And so the theater company that I was in, most of us were deaf, and we had a few hearing folks as well. And we were on tour together. And later on, when we finished our tour, I got a job teaching theater at California School for the Deaf Riverside. And during that time, I was involved in some Deaf West productions. And really, I have been teaching for almost 10 years, and I decided to get my master's degree in theater arts from San Diego State University. And after that, I went to another grad school, which was the American Film Institute, or AFI, and I went to their film producers program. So currently, I'm teaching at Cal State Northridge. I teach theater there part-time. And the reason why I'm explaining everything about my background is because I have a traditional theater training, and I had never heard of Fringe. I never heard of Fringe until about 4 years ago. And about 2 years ago, I finally worked with Justin Maurer and a show called Falling on Deaf Eyes, which I co-wrote and directed. And I directed that production, and it was my first experience at Fringe. And it was really quite a challenge to get used to the format. And the reason why deaf people haven't been attending Fringe is because there hasn't been interpreters present. And so deaf folks can't really enjoy Fringe shows. And that may have been one of the reasons why I didn't know about Fringe, is because I was left out. And if there were interpreting services, then maybe I would have already known about Fringe earlier. So it's not, you know, on purpose really, but that was my personal experience. And when we did our production, you know, we were very aware that we needed to provide accommodations, and we wanted to set an example. And so we were not perfect, of course, because of financial reasons. You know, we had a limited budget, and our theater, it was extremely important that we saw a few limitations in the small space we were performing in, and it made us think harder about accessibility for mobility issues, for deaf, for vision, and many other types of disabilities. And so we tried our best to provide accommodations by informing people, if you need accommodations, please get in touch with us directly. Please get in touch and the producers will find a solution. And it was a challenge because I noticed that we had the same problem with YouTube. And YouTube, didn't have closed captioning at first. And people were uploading videos and it was almost like Fringe format. So if you had a regular movie or TV show and, they have the budget to spend on closed captioning to provide those services. But YouTube now has finally been improving their captioning. But other video streaming services, when people upload, like TikTok or all of these, they're not captioned. And so I'm comparing that to Fringe because Fringe can become like YouTube and become more accessible in the future with audio description, with closed captioning, with interpreting services, and all of the above. So I better stop now because we have a lot more to discuss.
No, absolutely. You're spot on, and I think that is a really important thing to name, is that it is not Fringe's history to be the most accessible festival, and it is a part of what we are setting the example for. Is that we were like, "Oop, well, we're going to change that with our 2-year accessibility plan that is going to be renewed every 2 years with improvements upon that." And I think that that's really important, is to take the steps in the moment. As small producers, we're a tiny org. We seem huge. We don't have a full-time staff. We don't have an office. I have a full-time job outside of Fringe, and as do all of my coworkers, but that doesn't excuse literally anything, because there are so many steps that you can take to make your production accessible, to make things happen. And I think that's what I'm so excited to kind of dig in with you. And I really love that there was a lot of touch on like the idea that we don't live in like a this or that kind of world. The world lives in so much gray area. And we kind of touched on that a little bit. And I'd love to dig in a little bit deeper there, because disability is a spectrum, just like gender is a spectrum, just like so many things are. And I think it'll be really, and I think accessibility as a word can mean so many things. It's intersectional and evolving, just like other movements are as well. So I wanted to know, what does accessibility mean to you personally? And is it different from just disability inclusion? And so if anybody would love to jump off with that question, let me know. Otherwise, I'll pick you.
I'm always happy. I was gonna say, I'll just keep going first if that works for everybody. Yeah, one of the things that
I'll wait for you. I'll wait for you. Okay, go ahead.
One of the things that obviously, like we just touched on a bunch, is talking about, if you have an individual who you're working with, and let's just, for the sake of saying, we're all producers here, you have somebody in your cast who has a disability, you should absolutely speak to that person directly and say, what is your specific need? Just like Diana mentioned, she has CP and she has different needs than other people who have CP. So you should check with that specific person, but also recognize that like that specific person, which is just like what Spencer said, might not be the person who should be your go-to person for all disability things. Let your actor just be your actor. And yes, they have a disability and you should ask them about their specific needs in the capacity as actor. But for anything else, you should be going to these external resources, and there are so many of them. But as far as like the access question, so I'm here as a part of Respectability, which is a disability organization, and I'm also here as a part of my production company, which is called Indivisible. And one of the things we focus on, I mentioned that term production accessibility coordinator before, is that accessibility is not just about disability. Even if we talk about general workplace things, and we just went through COVID, where your accessibility need might have nothing to do with disability. And so really thinking about accessibility in these broad intersectional terms about how you get people to your shows. And not only that, but again, from a production standpoint of how do you make accessibility accessible for you? If your show has a budget of $5,000 for its full run, you might be listening to some of these accessibility things that we talked about and going, wow, I would love to have an interpreter at every single one of my shows. I have no idea if I can afford that. What does that even cost? What does that mean? And talking about, again, this sort of spectrum approach, we use the term the menu, which is basically that there are lots of different options for ways that you can make things accessible. And you should talk directly with the disabled folks that you're working with, or the people who have access needs that you're working with. Those people might not identify as disabled or with the disability community, just like Ellen talked about at the very top of the conversation. But that you can pick and choose what works for your production. And as I mentioned, like, there's also tons of resources. If you want to have interpreters at every single one of your shows, that's amazing and wonderful, and definitely like A+ gold standard. There are pro bono places you can talk to. You can get more involved with the deaf community and say, hey, I want to make this happen. How can I do that? Same thing if you want to have your venue be a place that doesn't have a ramp. You can talk with that venue and say, hey, can we get a ramp put in for the run of my show? And, you know, find a way to make it work within whatever your budget is. And that's sort of the other side of the coin of accessibility, is it's not just about providing services, it's also about making sure that it's something that's manageable and sustainable for you to do, because we would much rather you do the not perfect thing. Respectability always uses the phrase, don't let perfect get in the way of good. Maybe you can't have that perfect thing all the time, but if you can have something that's good or good enough for a solid amount of time and continue to make progress with that and continue to grow down that path of good enough towards the perfect gold star that's on the horizon, that's great. And we love to see that happen.
This is Jevin, if I may jump in. So I'd like to follow that up and regarding interpreting services. So I know that having an interpreter every show can be very, very expensive. And keep in mind that many signed interpreting shows have specific dates, and those are for various shows, whether they're big or small. They will often choose specific days or two specific days. You know, as a community, we don't want to have to go on the worst day, like on a Sunday late afternoon or something, and everyone that may not want to go to that assigned interpreting day, we may want to go on a popular night too, once in a while. So please keep that in mind, that not all deaf people know sign language too. And don't forget about late deafened adults. Some people, as they're getting older, their hearing deteriorates, and that's why closed captionings might be valuable to them. Or there might be some military veterans who have lost their hearing and don't know sign language. So if you put an interpreter in front of them, they may not understand. So that's just something to keep in mind and think about. We often like to, it would be really nice if there was a Fringe list, whether the show had accessibility or not. And you could, by default, the deaf community would assume there'd be no access and just not go altogether. So it's really important to reach out and ally and collaborate, because when you reach out to these communities, then we can become aware that we're able to go. And so, you know, we're not asking for 100% of the shows, but maybe you could pick specific dates here and there that would be accessible. And the challenge is, of course, funding. And, you know, we'd love to see some kind of fund to just provide support for Fringe accessibility. And so people could donate to that fund, and it wouldn't just be for the deaf, but a whole variety of access. And that would be really cool if that could be possible. And, you know, Fringe is a great way to express new ideas, and the deaf community would be much more motivated to be involved and do more shows themselves from our community too.
I absolutely, Jevin. I totally agree. And actually, I have a little bit of an announcement that next year it is a part of our plan to have parsed out advertisement for what is and isn't available. And this year, we're putting stuff into our site and into our app, which will be announced at our town hall on Saturday. But next year there will be a packet too of shows that and what they do and don't provide, which is so exciting. It is. And I just want to pass it along to Spencer or Diana. Oh, Diana has her.
Oh yeah. Um, use the resource guide. There are resources within the guide. Use Kaya because it's amazing, and the reason I'm saying using Kaya is the Rainbow Butterfly Cafe. That one that's done by me. She's really busy producing a show, and so and that's a lot of work. And so, but no, seriously, guys, there are resources, and use them. And another thing I recommend is when you start your budget in the beginning, if you start to incorporate accessibility from the beginning in the same way, you're gonna have to spend money on marketing. You're gonna have to say, how do we market this show on our budget? So if you have $5,000 to produce your whole show, which is, if you have that, call me because I want to know how you got $5,000 to produce your show. But whatever, if you have $500 to produce your show, maybe there's something called pro bono signers. You can pay them, and I know because I went on their site. They asked, "Do you have money to produce the show?" If you're doing a GoFundMe campaign, right? You can say, "We are raising money so we can make our shows accessible." The really cool thing about when you start thinking that way is if you open yourself up to being more accessible to the disaster community, for example, and you have more audience members who are coming to your show, that's going to be money that's going to be replenishing the bank, right? You're replenishing because you're opening it up to a more paying market. And also, when you think about casting, we talk about diversity. So, if you're committed to focusing on diversity and inclusion in your cast, think of that also when casting your shows too. That there's a whole community of very talented artists. And look in your own community. For example, well, I have a venue now. I'll be live streaming, but before that, I was going to take a friend of mine venue shopping with me. Well, if you know somebody who uses a wheelchair, your brother, your sister, your someone at your place of worship, your neighbor, say, hey, would you come venue shopping with me? You use a wheelchair. Will you come venue shopping with me? Um, if you know someone who has a disability, that you're just asking them to support you in that way. You go venue shopping because I went to a couple of venues that said they were wheelchair accessible, and I walked in the door and said, "Oh, yeah, I know you mean well, but So again, when you're building that community of advisors, I'm simply gonna reach out to Kaya because I don't have all the answers. I do this work, but I need more support because I'm wearing two different hats. I'm wearing another hat right now doing my show, so I need someone else. So that's again, when those of you have a theater company, why not have an accessibility advisor on your board? Those of you that have boards for your theater company, which are usually volunteer boards anyway, why not think about including an accessibility advisor as part of your board if you have a theater company? These are ways to not make it just about the Fringe, but make it part of your daily artistic practice of inclusion and access.
Absolutely, Diana. I think that making it a part of your daily practice of inclusion and access is the key there. And I think I want to talk for a second. I'm going to get to you, Spencer, because I want you to answer the question. But in a little bit, we're going to talk more about resources and things like that. And you're right, there are 3 pages of resources within our participant guide. So hollywoodfringe.org/participants. There are pro bono interpreters inside of there that you can reach out to. There are paid interpreters that you can reach out to, and we'll grow that as we grow our networks, because It's just like being a producer. So we are an organization that has grown our network through Fringe over 10 years just by meeting different people. And that's how organizations change and grow. And that's exactly how you as a producer change and grow. So why would that work any different for a new movement that you're trying to include within your practice? It is that like daily work of, exactly like you said, Diana, including more people into your creative process and getting that there. I love that. That's a really great point. And I wanted to ask Spencer to answer the question as well.
Yeah, so there's been a lot of great information. So it's like it's hard to follow. Not like follow because of my fogginess, but literally follow all of these great answers. Um, but for me, what I would say accessibility means to me is, and I wrote it down because I was like, I'm not going to remember what I said, and I like what I wrote. I said having the opportunity to experience an event at its fullest. And what I generally mean by that is, of course, there are access needs for people that have access needs, but I should be able to experience the show as anyone else would, maybe just with a specific need. Like, for example, for me, when I go see shows, and you put something up on a projector and you expect me to read it with the font you put on there, you can forget it. But maybe if I'm sitting in a certain spot, it might be easier for me to see, or having a handout of like, here's the PowerPoint that's on there, here's the hard copy of the PowerPoint, or a docx that I can download before the show, or whatever the case may be. That's just one example. But knowing that like, oh, I'm not missing much. There's literally a picture. What I'm seeing in my hand is literally what's on the screen, so I don't have to worry about feeling like I'm missing out on anything. And that's just one example. I know that, again, there's a range of needs for different people and their disabilities, but just knowing that I'm not missing out on anything because I don't have something that the rest of the audience has. So having the access in whatever way it is allows me to experience it as everyone else would, just in my own way.
100% Spencer. And I think that, we keep saying this, but it is just like an ever growing process. And I think that's why we keep bringing it up. But it's going to change with every show you do, with every cast you have, just like anything else, And so it's exciting to be able to really talk about it in that way. Oh, go ahead, Diana.
Yeah, and again, I hope you hear what saying that it's a process to figure out. I mean, I'm a solo show. I have an interpreter. I'm trying to figure out audio description right now because I have that it's going to be auto described. I'm trying to figure that out because as an actor, for me to say myself, now I'm walking across the stage to pick up a prop, that that doesn't necessarily work for me at the show. But how do in a live stream show I make it accessible? That's like and that's I love that Spencer's my mentor and things like that. So again, I want to thank you all for showing up because I've been to a lot of these, and this is probably one of the smallest attended, and I'm gonna say that not from an angry place, but from a place of I think it speaks to where the value of accessibility is right now, and the fact that you're here. I'm really glad because I still think a lot of people don't think about it because really this is probably one of the smallest attended panels I've been to, and I'm not saying that as a few, I'm saying it as a true. It's true. A lot of the people on this panel are part of the panel. So the fact that we have about 5 people here that aren't a part of the panel, I'm really glad. But I think when I've been on these, that sometimes they're attended by 30, 40 people. I think this shows how much we need to learn about making access a permanent part of our our inclusive thinking. So I just really, really thank you for being here, because it's important.
It's important and evolving, which does mean that people should come, even if you're like, I can check that off the list, because it is one of those things. I agree, Diana, where it you can't check it off the list. You should be in conversation and in community with people to get to this place. And that leads me to my next question, which is that Fringe is an open access festival, meaning anyone can put on any type of show and they can make it accessible or not. Um, what made you feel that it was important to start to provide disability access in your practice? And how did you start to find the resources when you were beginning of your production career? How did you start to pull together those resources?
This is Jevin. The most important thing, I want to give just an example before I give my explanation. So I was watching a Broadway musical that was Miss Saigon. And, you know, it was quite well-known musical about the Vietnam War. And so it was a beautiful show, and, you know, it's an expensive ticket for me. And I went with a date. We went to the Broadway show, we sat down, and they had an interpreter, and we were thrilled. And the show started, and I had to really crane my neck to see the interpreter way up in the opera box. And I was like, okay, so if I'm looking this way, I'm missing the show this way. And I spent the money to watch the show, but I'm being forced to choose between the interpreter or the show. And that was a problem. It was like you have a painting and an artist has painted this beautiful portrait and it's framed. And then I tell them, hey, do you mind changing one thing? And of course, the artist would just explode and be upset. Or, hey, could you just have a white canvas and discuss some ideas, and maybe you can ask first. And then you can incorporate that into the painting. And then the artist will be proud and have some kind of ownership of that experience. And that's all we ask, is that, you know, I don't know if we can make that accommodation. Just ask before you get started. And just ask that question, and it won't hurt. And maybe they'll say, oh, that's cool, we can incorporate it in some way, instead of forcing, you know, shoving the interpreter into the opera box in order for the director to keep his vision and be able to provide access. And so really, you'd be surprised that there's many of us will have amazing solutions because we are survivors. And as survivors, we find a way to survive. We can give you some kind of really cool tip, and you can go from there. So it's really important to ask first.
Absolutely, Jevin. I think that's absolutely right. Does anybody else have any other answers to this?
I will jump on after Jevin just to sort of give somewhat of a polar response, which is we have the ADA, which is going to have its 31st birthday this summer, coming up very soon. The ADA is the Americans with Disabilities Act. And the Americans with Disabilities Act is basically the civil rights law for people with disabilities, which says that you don't really have the option whether or not to make your space accessible. And right now, you sort of have wiggle room right now, because there are lots of things that, you know, aren't being really enforced. There are lots of things that we just don't have the knowledge yet, or that knowledge hasn't really been disseminated to, you know, the larger population. And since I also work in sort of like the corporate and commercial space as well, and one of the things that I always tell people is that you kind of have two options. Oh, sorry. Sorry, we had a friend come over. One of the things that I always tell people is you have two options. You can either do it now when everybody is really excited for you to jump on the train early. They're going to want to help you. They're going to want to give you discounts. They're going to want to be a partner in making that happen. Or you can do it later when it's legally required, I'm going to charge you a lot more money to make it happen. And I'm definitely not going to be as nice to you about it, because I'm going to go, you could have done this with me 5 years ago and it would have been less expensive. And we all would have given you the moral brownie points for getting it done earlier before you were legally required to for certain things. Again, technically legal requirements right now. And again, that's language that I use for corporate folks who have all sorts of money and should be doing it right now and have no excuse whatsoever to not be doing it. But as far as thinking about your own journey moving forward, finding ways to make that access happen. And again, like we keep talking about, it's a learning process. It's an evolving learning process. Even if we're just talking about assistive technology and how to make things more accessible with technology. I'm working with a company right now that's doing synthetic voice audio description. So that's like a way more accessible price for people who are working in small budget things. And that didn't exist 2 years ago, or it didn't exist in a way that was particularly viable. But continuing to do that and remembering that it's not really a choice. You might have a choice now because it's not really being enforced, but it's not a choice. You have to find a way to make it work. You cannot just choose to discriminate because you don't feel like having your show be accessible. So as far as my personal journey goes, that was definitely something that, that's the space that I work from, which is, it's not an option. You have to figure it out. And yes, we want that process to be accessible. And that's, what my work is how do we make that accessible for everybody? But it's not something that you can just go, oh yeah, in 20 years from now, I'm still going to choose not to be accessible. I don't really care. I don't need it. I don't care about the 25% of the world who does need it. I'm just going to do my own thing. So I think remembering that mindset as well, like Devin said, we want to be flexible with you. We want to give you, all sorts of leeway to figure things out. We don't want it to be a situation where you make one show 100% accessible and then you're bankrupt and you can never make art again. We don't want that to be the case. But remembering that it is a place that you're moving towards, that is a requirement. It's not a choice, it's a thing you have to do.
Go ahead, Diana. Yeah.
I just want to piggyback on Kaya, good. This is not a let's be nice social issue. It's a civil rights issue. It really is. It's a civil rights issue. The ADA is a civil rights law. It's a civil rights issue. And in the same way, and I make these comparisons, I don't think we would have a sign on your theater that said no African Americans allowed, or no people from the LGBT community. This show is not for you if you're gay or from the LGBT community. This is, you can't come if you're African American. We wouldn't think of that, But yeah, when you're not accessible, it's saying the same thing. And that may not be your intention and thought, but civil rights. And then Wayne, I think if we can start to see those parallels between the civil rights that we, the civil rights for other marginalized groups that may be based on race or gender identification, if we can see those parallels are exactly the same. Not only exactly the same, there's an intersectionality. Therefore, I identify as a straight Black woman with a disability. Those are all about, my disability is not something I hide. I can't hide. So if you think about the intersections, no one's just one thing. So, again, like Kaya said, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And these are civil rights issues. There are employment issues also when it comes to hiring. So it's not about doing the right social thing, it's about civil rights. And I think if you can make those parallels with other marginalized groups, hopefully that will help you realize there's not a difference. Civil rights are civil rights.
Absolutely. And I think, and something I just want to say that keeps popping into mind is we're uniquely suited as theater producers to make accessibility choices because we are problem solvers. We are people that go into a space and we're like, you know, aesthetically, that spotlight isn't working for me. Let me MacGyver it into a completely different technical uh, element. How can we do that but not provide these simple access needs? And I think that that's what we have to really open up our minds to, is how do we, with the resources that we have within our scope, do that? And if we don't have those resources within our scope, what communities are we not reaching out to? Who are we not talking to? How are we not opening up our community in that way? Because we all the time, theater producers network to the point where they're like, oh, I have a graphic designer on call that gives me that discount. We should have these things that we're also building within ourselves. And I know that people have been asking for specific resources in the chat on Facebook, and I just want to say that we, in the Hollywood Fringe participant guide, we have 3 resources for ASL interpretation: student volunteer communication services through Cal State Northridge, which you should make sure you do really soon if you're planning to use that resource or any of these resources. Pro Bono ASL, and then Life Science Inc. And I'm sure that there's more that people on this panel can name. So if there's any other resources after Spencer goes, because I don't want to forget you, Spencer, we could maybe popcorn some other resources that people can look at as well. Go ahead, Spencer.
That's what I get for being an introvert, is the last other group. No, just kidding. What I was gonna say is, as far as education, um, 2 really blunt things here. One, there's something called Google that you can use to literally Google anything. I can't guarantee how great what you Google will be, but you can Google things. So I'm just gonna throw that out there. I tried to do it with a really dead face, and it was really hard for me to like say it without smiling. But there is Google. The second thing of a resource is, again, you have people with disabilities who are more than happy to guide you to resources and help educate you on resources that are available. And what I mean by that is not asking the person, I think Kaya brought this up, not asking the person who has the disability to do the work. It's the requirement of the producer or the person who's doing the production to do the work. I, as someone with partial blindness or whoever has whatever disability, can guide you to resources of like, hey, if you need this, maybe check in on this or check in on this. But I also have energy that I cannot just use to do the work for you. I can guide you in the direction to do the work, but I sometimes I will just do the work for you because like that's just me as a Capricorn. But the idea is that and I can only speak for myself, of course. I am more than happy to guide you in the direction of resources, but my threshold doesn't always involve me being able to actually physically call for an audio descriptive service or call for how to make your program Braille friendly, or where to go to get the interpreters, or like which interpreting service is the best, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I can guide you to the resources I have, which in turn can guide you to other resources, and that becomes a whole wide network, as like Ellen and everyone was talking about, with the idea of building the network of resources. So you're like, hey, I know exactly where I can go for X, Y, or Z because somebody told me that this is the resource I can go to. And then when there's more people that are building resources, hey, guess what? I know where a great interpreter service is. Oh, that's amazing. I know where a great Braille service is. Oh, that's amazing. I know where a great, like, so on and so forth. And that's a way to exchange the information and to exchange the resources. So keeping that in mind, we love helping. At least I'll say me. I'll say for me personally, I love helping, but I also have a threshold where I just can't provide all of the work. Unless you pay me a lot of money, then I can do it. But I guess that's what I'll say. Feel free to agree or disagree.
Oh, Jevin, I see that your hand is up, and Diana can go after too.
I just want to quickly say the Rainbow
Yeah, sure.
Cafe
I just
and
wanted
there's
to be
my consulting thing, and I just want to say
I
one
just
more
wanted
thing.
to clarify. I just wanted to clarify something. This is Jevin. People sometimes have a tendency to think that, oh, pro bono interpreters are free, but remember that interpreters have a career that they've worked hard. Sometimes they even go to grad school and they get certifications. And so to have that free expectation is kind of a sticky topic. There's people that think that the free interpreting services might fit our needs. And sometimes interpreters or student interpreters are willing to do it to be free, but the quality of interpreting is really not at a high standard that the audience would want. Just like audio descriptions and so on, there's businesses that are run and established to provide high quality services. So that can kind of be a sticky situation. And so it would be really nice to have one central fund that could be used to pay for all of these accessible needs that were of a high quality. And it seems like it should become, it could become a habit where folks try and get free interpreters. And I think, ouch, I know that interpreters are some of the hardest working people that I know, and they really work to try and make ends meet.
Yeah, thank you for saying that because it's 100% true. And I think within the Fringe community, and then I want to, and I know Diana has something to say, but within the Fringe community, we can have that across the board. People are often saying, "How can I get this resource for free? How can I get that resource for free?" And I understand that need and that want within the Fringe because we're like, it's all on my back and it's all my money and I don't know where to put it. But I think the more that we could include this, and I think what Fringe is going to encourage is to build that within your budget, just like you would a lighting designer or a stage manager. We can start to build these into our budgets and start to understand where that is. And I love the idea of having a fund for that. And that's definitely something to write down. Diana, you had something you wanted to say?
Yeah, two things. I'm using pro bono ASL, but I'm also giving them money. They have a form. I may not be able to afford their corporate, but I went in and I put this is what I can afford because of what Javon said, because it is important for me to acknowledge their work. I may not be able to afford $1,000 per show, but it is important for me to give them, because that is their service, but it is still important for me to make a donation or to say, hey, I acknowledge what you're doing, and that's important for me. The other thing I want to say when you're going, how does this work? How are we gonna work? So I'm gonna tell you the story. In January of 2020, if people told you that you would be working from home and 2 months from now, and that you would spend a year working from home and you would never leave your house, you would have thought, there's no freaking way that's ever gonna work. How is that ever gonna work? Okay, by April of last year, we all had to figure it out. Everybody in the world has to figure out their new normal. Everyone. Regardless of it, we were at level the playing field, regardless of the presence of a disability or whatever. We all were on the same level playing field. We had to figure it out. I had to say, this is hybrid of virtual, the Fringe. I'm not doing my show for the first time ever. I've never done that before. But my venue, because of the Delta variant, is saying we're having no audiences. So live audience, so I either give up my show, which I can't do because I committed to doing it. So my thing is, guys, everyone learned last year how to figure it out, and a year later we did. So we can do that. You guys can figure this out. Will it be easy? No, but if you're all here, that means you figured out how to get through last year. You figured it out, right? You may not have been thinking about that in February 2020, but by April 2020, you had to figure something out. And you survived it because you're here today in July 2021. So, they're really nice, and sorry, I'm not gonna be diplomatic, but figure it out. All you gotta do is figure it out. It may not be easy, but figure it out. That's what I'm doing. out because I didn't know. I just said I'm gonna audio describe my shows. I have no idea how the heck I'm gonna do it, but I'm gonna figure it out because I have to. Right? So I'm figuring it out along the way with you. We can have a support group. We just figure it out. Sorry if I was rude because I'm a nice girl. But just figure it out. That's all.
But that's what
Yeah.
a producer does. A
Okay.
producer figures it out, Diana, and I agree with that 100%. It's learning these new skill sets because 90, like we've said multiple times, it's 90% of it does fall on the producer. What are we going to do to put this into our brains? We're going to figure it out. We're going to make these steps. And that leads me into my next question, which is about sustainability. For so many people, of this is their first production they've ever done in theater, or maybe it's their first time back in the theater after a really long time. How do we make this a sustainable part of our theater practice and make sure that it's not just that, okay, I checked all the boxes for my Hollywood Fringe show? How do we make this a part of our art practice? Where should we get started with that? Go ahead, Spencer.
I never thought I'd be the first one to answer, but here I am. So now I get nervous because I said that. For me, I think it comes down to a lot of a want versus a need. And by that, I mean, for it to be sustainable, it's for me as a producer to go, I want everyone to be able to see my show, regardless of what accessibility needs they have. Not, I need to do this because I was told I have to, or like eventually, like Kaya said, when the ADA requires it, because then I feel like the passion isn't there as much of like, well, it's just checking off boxes because I was told I have to do it versus I want everyone to see my show. Like that's what the whole point of me putting a show up is, for everyone to be able to see it no matter what. And so I think that for me, I guess it's the long version was that. The short version is it's a want versus a need. I think if I feel more passionate and like I want to do it, it's going to make me continue to do it, that it just becomes another thing that's on my list of like, it's not like a, oh, I have to do it. It's like I get to do this. I get to share my show with all audiences versus I need to share it because I have to. But it's I get to. And someone also told me that a long time ago with changing your mindset and getting to do something versus having to do something makes it sound so less like a task and more of like something that's fun to do. Like I get to make my show accessible. Like what? I get to do that. Like, and I think just treating it like that, eventually the mindset will change because it feels like fun as opposed to a chore. I said the same thing like 3 times, but in different ways. But that was it. A want versus a need. Want to do it. Don't need to do it.
I'm going to jump in after Spencer because I absolutely love that. And one of the big things we talk about as well is like the art of accessibility. Like you get to jump into a whole additional art form here. Like you can Google alt text as poetry, which is a great group which talks about image descriptions and how image descriptions can be artistic. When we talk about like live captioning of, or sorry, live audio description of theater. I have a friend who is a dancer who is deaf, and she is deaf to a hearing family. So she is just learning sign now, and she voices a lot. And she, as a deaf person, has this amazing eye for movement and light and all of these things that I, as a hearing person, don't see at all. And so she also works as somebody who does live audio description for dance and theater, and getting able to have that experience even as somebody who doesn't technically need that service, it's a whole additional art that is added to your art. And I always that, can include other artists, and even that artistry can include other people who are disabled in the arts. And I just think that's so great. Like you have the ability to compound your artistry through the process of making it accessible and uncover all of these art forms that are access features and include that into your show. And I always just found that so exciting. So when we're talking about reframing mindset, like Spencer said, I love that. Like that's my shit, pardon my French. That's what we do is talk about this is an art form as well. So get excited about the art. Like this art makes your work accessible to 25% of the population. How could you not possibly be super excited about that art form and about including people. So yeah.
Go ahead, Diana.
I was thinking about your why. Why do you do this? I'm going to use the words of my friend Matt Quinn, my new friend Matt Quinn. Hi Matt, how are you, my new friend? Why? Why did you create theater? Why did you become an artist? Why did you produce theater? Why are you doing this? You're doing this to share your art with other people. You're doing this. What is your why? And hopefully your why is about sharing your story with as many people as possible, whether it's a musical or a comedy or a flip show, whatever it is. That's the great thing. The Fringe is about, Fringe means on the outside. The Fringe is about bringing outsiders together into the inside, right? But being this outsider community. So why do you do this? And if your why is about creating community, then wouldn't it be lovely if your community was as big and as diverse as possible? So think about your why and why you do that, and then how do you expand so that why is a more inclusive and open community for everybody.
This is Jevin, if I may chime in. So I completely agree. I think that it's a great opportunity for Fringe because, you know, many of these productions are low budget, and so we can be very creative and do whatever we want, as compared to an extremely large budget theater production. They will have a lot of investors and a lot of needs to be met with a lot of cooks in the kitchen, but you can become groundbreaking with new ideas, with new technologies, maybe something that's never been tried before. I remember in around 2006, I went to a Broadway production of Wicked. Maybe some of you know Wicked, it's quite famous now. And so there was no interpreter at the production of Wicked. And I flew to New York to see Wicked. And this was before it went out on tour. And they gave me, so this is before iPhones, right? And so they gave me like a little PC beeper sized gadget, and I turned it on. When the play started, there was captioning inside of that device. And I asked them, how does that work? Because, you know, you can put closed captionings into films or subtitles at specific times. How did the play work? And I found out that each caption was based on a light or sound cue. And so when the lights would change, that's when the caption was cued to pop up on my device. It was a light cue. And I was like, huh, I was actually really impressed. And I was like, this is not a bad idea. And so here at Fringe, you have the opportunity to experiment with no obstacles. And I think that that's a really great way to be the first in something. You can invent something new and be first, and then people will follow you. Why wait for someone else to do it? They don't know any better. Be first.
Be first, be bold. I love to hear that. And I think that is really true. It's what's so exciting and what draws me back to this community every time is that we are able to be bold and we are able to do it because who owns this community is the producers. It is the people who see shows. Uh, it's so inspiring every time to see how we do get to develop and change as we have new audience members, have new people integrated into the community. Diana, I think you were unmuted. Did you have something to say?
Yeah, I was thinking something, and French is all about doing something new. I mean, it's about taking Shakespeare and putting it under sea and making Hamlet be an octopus. And, you know, yeah, Hamlet's gonna be an octopus and Gertrude's gonna be a whale, and we're gonna do this puppet show and people are gonna go underwater and give people a breathing mask. I mean, that's what Friends is all about, is thinking not only outside the box, but breaking the box and calling this art. So it's a perfect place to do everything that everyone said, because like the Fringe is about being on the fringes. It's about breaking tradition. That's the history of Fringe, is not doing the traditional Oklahoma. Not that there's anything wrong with Oklahoma, but Fringe was created for people who were outside what we considered traditional theater. So it's a perfect place to incorporate everything these amazing artists have talked about. It's that Fringe Day. That's what Fringe is all about, is not only breaking the box, not having a box, and building a brand new box with no walls.
Absolutely. Let's build that new box together. I'm ready for it. You're making me excited to keep working on this as well. And I think that's what it is true. It is excitement to be able to take on these challenges. Thinking of that, where do we go from here? What are your wish lists for future festivals? Is a question that I would love to hear about. Go ahead, Spencer.
This is two in a row for me. Wow. Starting the I'm an extrovert now, I guess. Wow. No. For me, I think the biggest thing, just based on the conversation and based on my personal preference, is the top of the checklist being accessibility when thinking about the idea of the show, like from concept to execution, considering accessibility every step of the way, of what may I encounter in my show, like if I'm going to have screens and projectors and all of that, and I would say, I guess, like thinking of it like, is my show as it's written out in an accessible state? And the answer is always going to be no, because when you're writing a script, it's not accessible because you don't have interpreters, you don't have audio description, you don't have any of this at all. But thinking about it and keeping it in mind going forward, not waiting until the last minute, not waiting and like, oh, I've got to prioritize everything else. Adding accessibility as a priority, because you get to engage your audience, you get to have a bigger audience, you get to work with accessibility. And I put it in the chat before, 75% of the population is only a C. You're rocking a C. If you put another 25% in there, you get an A. Your show is always going to be an A with 100% accessibility. So just throwing that out there. Do you want to be mediocre with a C, or do you want to be awesome with an A, or accessible with an A? I just thought of that one. But that would be my top of my checklist, is to just keep in mind possible accessibility needs from the idea stage, and then going into the execution, just keeping it in mind every step of the way.
Jevin, yeah.
There's two things that I'd like to see happen. First of all, it would be really nice to encourage many smaller venues and smaller theaters, 99-seat theaters and below, it would be really nice if Fringe could give recognition and certify them as accessible, and not just, specific physical accessibilities like wheelchair and so on. We had one person who came to our show with a wheelchair, and it was really hard to get this person into the theater. And remember that a lot of the seats are already built in, and so we can't build our own theater set. So it would be really nice to be user-friendly for different accessibilities. Interpreters and audio descriptions obviously can happen, but I'm talking about permanent setups that these small shows can be certified. Fringe, a lot of these smaller seat theaters, you have a permanent seating environment. So it'd be nice to give some small theaters a seal of approval that they're accessible for future use. And, maybe in the future, Fringe shows could not be at theaters that were not certified as accessible. And I know it's really a challenge. We can't build our own set as Fringe producers because we're sharing the theater with other producers, obviously. But what I noticed is you give scholarships for diversity and disabilities. And I'm aware that there's probably one, correct me if I'm wrong, but it would be nice to see 5 in the future, 5 different scholarships. And that would get people a lot more motivated. With just one, you know, it is cool, but if you just continue to give out one scholarship every year, it starts to feel like tokenism. And you're just checking off the box by giving this one scholarship a year. And if you want to grow, then you should increase these scholarships. I would really love to see that in the future. Thank you.
Me too, Devin. Yeah, we have one program right now with 15 winners, and we hope to, and Diana is one of them for this year, and we're hoping to increase that in the future as well. And so if you are watching this and you want to fund Fringe Scholarships expansion, you should email me and I will talk to you about that, because we would really love to do that. And I think that that's what is really a part of it as Fringe, is that we do want to give back to the shows that are setting the tone for the community, that we want the community to evolve from, because it is about producers learning how to produce their work, and it's so exciting. And thank you for that. I think that that would be something that I'm putting on as what I want to see as well. I'm gonna throw it to someone else. Does someone else have a future wish list? Kaya, Diana?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and jump on. Absolutely second and echo what was already said. One of the things that we sort of talk about just as far as consulting goes is that our job is to kind of put ourselves out of the job. We want to create a space in the future where you don't need to consult with somebody, where you don't need to spend that money, or you don't need to spend the money twice to fix that thing where, you know, you built your set and it only is 30 inches wide and it needs to be 60 inches wide in order to fit somebody's wheelchair. Like, we want you to already have the information. We want you to have the knowledge. We want it to become a seamless part of your process, in the same way that you move from casting to, you know, tech and lighting. We want all of that to be a part of your process. We want it to feel like something that everyone individually feels like they have the knowledge to do. I know that's something that's really scary when you're sort of getting into the disability space, just because it is so massive and it's such a spectrum, and there are so many people and there are so many individuals even within the subgenres of disability community. And so it can really feel, I'm not sure what word I'm thinking of, but it can really feel overwhelming to be entering that space. And I think one of the things that I would really love to see in the future is a growing comfort with exploring that space. A lot of things that happen in the disability community are, you know, I don't know if anybody will know this, but so I actually started working in disability theater in 2009 with a group called Penguin Project, which is a community theater group that does theater for social change, and it specifically pairs disabled kids. It's, you know, somebody between the ages of like 7 and 22, so kids and young adults, with non-disabled peer mentors. And what was so incredible about that program is that it wasn't about teaching the disabled people social skills. It wasn't about teaching the disabled people how to, you know, whatever. It was actually about teaching their non-disabled peers, how do you lead somebody who's blind? How do you have a conversation with somebody who's nonverbal? It was all about this education for the non-disabled folks of essentially, how do you find your comfort here? And it's a wonderful program because, again, it's all geared towards kids and young people. So amazing if anybody has a small hometown and they want to go tell that hometown to look into Penguin Project as a community theater extension. But having that comfort, and that comfort even including the space of, wow, I just learned about this new thing and I have no idea what that means. You know, I mentioned synthetic voice audio description earlier. If you just went, which for anybody who, well, I'm not sure if we, for the access need of it, I just made a very confused deadpan face if you need an image description there, since I was silent. If you don't know what it is, getting into the space of comfort to explore. you don't know what it is, go learn about it and like find the joy and the ease and knowing that like the disability community is really going to welcome whatever that exploration is. I always tell people, so I have a strange name as well, so I use this for this, that I always tell people I give people 10 chances to get my name wrong before I'm a little bit annoyed that they can't get my name right. And I've had people tell me like, why shouldn't it be like, if you don't, you get to get it wrong once and then you should get it right the next time. And I always say, well, what if they didn't hear me the first time? And so the second time is really their first time. Or what if they're neurodiverse and I said it 3 times and it's just not making sense yet and they need me to say it in another way? So getting into this space of, you have so many chances to get it wrong. You can get it wrong again and again and again. And as long as you are continuing to make the progress and put in the effort, find your peace and comfort. This is a very allyship thing as well, right? Find your peace and comfort with being the person who is wrong and sometimes being the person who looks like an asshole, and being okay with being the person who is wrong until you get it right. Because as long as you put in the effort, you will get it right. You will get it right. You will understand it. You will have comfort. And that's what that's my wish list item.
And I just piggyback on that, and like I said, not that it's in a more loving way, you just figure it out, I'll say that again, because I'll be really honest, I'm looking at the open captioning, and when it's not getting exactly what I say right, and I'm like, I'm gonna have this at my show, and open captioning, and some people are gonna think, what in the heck is she talking about? That doesn't make any sense, because they're gonna read my captions, which is gonna be a little off from what I said. But you know what? That's a chance I'm willing to take, because what I'm not willing to do is not do it, and therefore I close myself off to a whole audience. So they might miss some of it, but at least I feel I'm opening up that opportunity for them to also get some of it, as opposed to not getting it at all because I'm not giving them any access. Right? So, and what I was up to see, I'm really glad we're having this panel. But I would love to see the day when we don't need these panels. And I would love to see the day when we're building, not only building a community in the arts of anti-racism, but anti-ableism. Because I think ableism is something that we're not as aware of how systemic it is, because it's viewed in a very different way. So as important as I'm sure it is for some of you to be allies in anti-racism, I would invite you all to say how you might be able to be allies in anti-autism, justice, and anti-ableism. And that's, again, Google is your friend. So I love that don't let perfect get in the way of good, guys. It's just, you're here. That's part of it. Again, you just, like I said, we did last year, we figured it out, right? Because we had to stay home, so we had to figure it out. So I just hope we continue to build a community of people who get excited about how we figure it out. There's nothing that scares us or facing our fear and doing it anyway. That's one of my favorite. Face your fear, feel your fear, take a deep breath and do it anyway. It's okay to be scared. I am terrified of audio description, not of it, but how am I going to do it for my show? Because I said I would, now I have to figure it out. So that's my producer hat, right? Because I'm acting and I'm producing, but I'm going to figure it out. And I invite you all to do that with me too.
Yes, you're not alone in this learning process, and I'm so excited for Fringe to build a support system for that as well. And thank you so much for being a part of that today. These panelists are incredible. Our interpreters are amazing. Our staff that is supporting on the call, I am so grateful for all of you. I do want to ask if there's any questions before we go into some breakout spaces, which is actually when we're going off live stream. So is there just 5 minutes of questions that we have here? And if not, we'll go straight into the other part. Anyone?
I just want to throw out real quick too, just we mentioned about mentioning specific resources later on. I have numerous, Respectability has numerous, so I will shoot a message to Ellen after this so that they can send out whatever they want to everyone, just so we don't end up spending 10 minutes at some point going this and this and this and this and all that good stuff. So lots of resources, specific resources to send out to everybody as well.
We will send it out in our official Hollywood Fringe announcements too. So once we get that compiled, we'll make sure to put it with the recording of this panel as well, so that people who weren't able to make it today can get this information, because I think it's very important. And I'm gonna move on. I think we're gonna go off live stream for today. Thank you all so much on our Facebook Live for watching, and we're gonna move into just a couple of breakout spaces really quickly. What this is going to be is basically you're going to go into breakout spaces with 2 people. And when you're in that space, you're going to start to kind of create your events checklist that you should be thinking about within your Fringe show, within the Fringe. And we at the Fringe have also developed an events checklist that we'll kind of talk about when we all come back. So I'm going to open up these 2 breakout spaces really quickly. And if you can go be in community with each other and start to kind of put together your lists, and it'll be really exciting. And whoops, sorry, I did not open it. You are now opened, and it is open. It is open, so you can go now. It will tell you to go to the room.